You are an African and a mediator and conflict resolution specialist in the U.S. You follow the events from Ivory Coast to Burkina Faso to Mali to Niger to Guinea, what is happening in Sudan. When you put all this together, I want to ask you, what is it happening here in Africa? What's happening to us?
Unfortunately, not good things, as you all know. We have been following all these bad events unfolding right now, particularly in the Sahel region. And unfortunately, we have sort of become numb to all these events unfolding in Africa. It's like it's normal. A coup happening in Africa, it's normal. Famine in Africa, it's normal. Political strife, it's normal. It's sad. It's sad. But as an African, I would say it's a shame. It's a shame that despite all of the resources that we have, natural resources, people, and yet we're still struggling. Military coups, corruption, bad governance, ethnic strife. It's time for this to stop, and we can stop it. We can stop it. I'm faithful that African people can do it. African people have shown how much they are capable, how much they can do when they decide to do it. The era of the 1960s has shown us that when African people decide to take their destiny in hands, they can do it.
Now, we've had series of conferences, series of symposiums, meetings everywhere in Africa, trying to find lasting solutions to these problems. We still cannot find a single solution. Is it because of bad leadership, or is it still the influence of the West?
I think it's all of the above. While the external factors play a great role in what's going on in Africa, I think it's about time for African people to realize and admit that we are responsible of what's going on in our continent. Let's take it at a personal level, and let's look at let's say, from a cognitive psychology perspective. You as an individual, when you're struggling in your life, you can struggle, it's normal, this is life, this is something natural. But when do you get out of that turmoil, out of this bad situation? Be honest with yourself and say, it's the time when you say, okay, I am where I am because I deserve it, because I do nothing to solve my problems, because I let others take over my own destiny. So we have to work as Africans and say, first, yes, others try to interfere in our business, but guess what? It's a fair game. If Westerners, if Europeans, Americans, Chinese, and Russians come to Africa and take our resources, good for them. Good for them if they can do it. And if there is someone to blame, is we African people, we let them do it. We let them do it, and history has shown us that they do it through other Africans. Go back to the 16th, 17th century, when first time Vasco da Gama came to Africa. They came, it was a route for them to go to India. And by chance, they started stopping and starting those ports And they didn't go inside Africa. They used Africans they met first to control other Africans, to take resources, to even do slavery. Slavery was done by white people, yes. But guess what? Who were complicits? African people. Some African people. We have some bad apples, bad tomatoes in our basket, and we have to take care of that. You are right. So as you see, it's both. It's external, yes, external factors. It's the West, is Russia now and China and the West, but it's also African people. So we have to look at these issues from within ourselves and from outside. And we hopefully during this show, we can talk about these details.
Okay, so yeah, yesterday I had the opportunity to go through a few documents, research put together in Japan in 1984 about the resources of the French-speaking African countries, and then also read something from the Washington Post, what they did about the natural resources here in the west part of Africa. Arguably, they were saying that the whole of the 15 French African countries, when you put their natural resources together, the 15 countries can take care of the entire Europe and themselves. Then when you pick the Anglophone, Ghana, Nigeria, and all the English-speaking African countries, our natural resources together, we can also take care of America, Asia, and the other parts of the world, and ourselves. Now, why is it that, arguably, the richest continent in the world, we still have the poorest people?
Can you repeat your question? There was a cut.
I am asking that the African continent arguably is the richest continent.
Correct.
In the world. Why do we still have very, very poor people in our midst? Why? Why are we poor?
Well, as you said, people are poor, but the countries are not. Africa has always been seen by outsiders as their bread basket. Europe, particularly, and France, since you're talking about West Africa, France, for African people to understand, France cannot exist economically and politically as it is now without Africa.
That's right.
You disconnect France from Africa, French are gone. They will starve. They will. I'm saying this, of course, it won't happen because they have resources to keep Africa serving their interests. But since we're talking about Niger, France holds more than 62% of Niger's uranium. Mm-hmm. France controls directly or indirectly most of resources in West African underground. You name it, oil, uranium, gold, and so forth. And of course, things have developed. Now it's not only France, it's not only Europe. There are other countries coming in because guess what? Resources are plentiful. We still have those resources. And every day we discover new resources. Maybe the data that you have now is obsolete. If we had millions of cubic meters of gas, now we have trillions of that. The same thing with the gold, with all other minerals and water and agriculture. So yes, these countries, they come and they take those resources. Let's say that Africa is also a young, if you look at Africa as a country, we have a bunch of countries, 55, 56 countries.
Yes.
The problem also is that we should not forget that Africa had gone through colonialism. This is an era that has affected us at all levels, physically, economically, politically, socially. Even our belief systems have evolved, sometimes changed. And I remind you of Berlin Conference in 1885, 86, 84, 85.
That's right.
European countries looked at Africa as a pie, right? You remember that?
Yes.
And they divided Africa between them. And the way they divided is like they divided in geographically, like it was a grotesque divide. Some countries were too small and are still too small to take care of themselves, to even create any kind of economy and or industry or agriculture. Other countries are too big to be able to control themselves. You look at country, you mentioned Nigeria. Okay, it's a great country. It's a big, and I'm not challenging those for one time, African Union leaders were smart enough to say, let's not challenge those borders, because if we challenge those borders today, it will be big mess. Rather than challenging those borders now, let's come together and mentally take out those borders and start to work together. So yes, maybe one of the principal advice, I would say, enemies to Africa are some African people. Bad leadership, but bad leadership. The leaders in Ghana, aren't they Ghanaians? The leaders in Niger, aren't they Nigerians? The leaders in Algeria, are they Algerians? But it's like they are used by other forces. It's good to be aware of that. But I always tell to my fellow Africans, yes, it's good to be aware of that, but let's change that mentality. And each time, look, we're talking still, we're 2023, and we're talking about, what others are doing against Africa. Yeah, it's good to be aware of it, but let's think outside the box. And even you as an individual, even me, I'm still blaming Europeans. And guess what? Our leaders, our corrupt leaders, they tell us the same narrative. It's like they want us to believe only in this option. This option is true. It's a reality. But what about them? What have they done to change